I'm Autumn Hayes, 29, and my phone won't stop buzzing with frantic calls from my parents. My brother Brian crashed his graduation gift Tesla, and somehow it's becoming my fault. The $90,000 car they'd never give me is now wreckage, and they're constructing a perfect narrative where their golden child is blameless. But after years of this treatment, I finally took one step that turned their whole world upside down. Before I share how my parents' perfect illusion came crashing down, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if family drama resonates with you. Growing up in our affluent Seattle neighborhood, I always knew where I stood in my family's hierarchy. Second place. My brother Brian, 3 years younger, somehow always managed to be first in our parents' eyes. Our house was beautiful, 4 bedrooms and queen, and with a view of Puget Sound, but inside those walls existed 2 completely different childhoods. Our parents, Elaine and Howard Hayes, built successful careers in corporate law and investment banking respectively. They weren't struggling financially by any measure. Dad drove a Mercedes, Mom had her BMW, and vacations to Europe were annual traditions. This context makes what follows even more frustrating. When I showed interest in piano at age 8, my parents rented an instrument and said we'd see how it goes before committing. When Brian wanted to play hockey at 7, they immediately purchased top-of-the-line equipment and hired a private coach. My rental piano disappeared after 6 months when I wasn't progressing fast enough. Brian's hockey enthusiasm waned after 3 months, but they continued paying for private coaching for 2 more years, just in case. This pattern repeated throughout our childhoods. My academic achievements, straight as National Honor Society, debate team captain, received perfunctory acknowledgement. "That's expected from you, Autumn," Mom would say with a quick pat on my shoulder. Meanwhile, when Brian managed to pull his D in algebra up to a B-, my parents took the entire family out to celebrate at Seattle's most expensive steakhouse. Family gatherings amplified this dynamic. Brian got a B in algebra. My mother would announce proudly to relatives at Thanksgiving. Aunt Melissa would gasp in exaggerated amazement, while Uncle Greg would slide Brian a $20 bill. When my cousin asked about my debate team making it to nationals, my father interrupted. "Did you hear Brian scored a goal in hockey practice?" I developed coping mechanisms early. I'd retreat to my room with books, finding fictional worlds more equitable than my own. I became fiercely self-reliant, knowing I couldn't count on parental support. By 15, I was working part-time at a local cafe while maintaining perfect grades. My first paycheck went toward a laptop for schoolwork since my parents determined Brian's gaming computer was the household priority. "Autumn's just naturally gifted," my mother would tell neighbors, as if my accomplishments required no effort. "Brian really has to work for everything, poor thing." The subtext was clear. My achievements were dismissible. His mediocrity was valorized. When college applications rolled around, I applied for every scholarship possible, knowing my parents' contributions would be limited. They'd been depositing money into Brian's college fund since his birth, but mine had been depleted years earlier for family emergencies that somehow always coincided with Brian's latest equipment needs or summer camps. I received a partial scholarship to Washington State University, but still needed loans and worked 30 hours weekly throughout college. Meanwhile, my parents sent Brian to Stanford with full financial support, a new apartment, and a monthly allowance that exceeded my entire monthly income. After graduation, I moved to a tiny studio apartment with 3 roommates and landed an entry-level marketing position. Every promotion came through extra projects, late nights, and consistent excellence. Meanwhile, Brian graduated with a middling GPA, and my parents immediately leveraged their connections to secure him a cushy corporate position. 6 years into my career, I finally achieved some measure of success. I became marketing director at a growing tech firm, earned enough to rent my own apartment, and met Nathan Reynolds, a software engineer who quickly became my strongest supporter. Nathan was the first person who truly saw the dysfunction in my family dynamic without me having to explain it. "It's not normal, Autumn," he'd tell me after particularly difficult family dinners. "You know that, right? What they're doing isn't okay." I'd spent so many years normalizing the treatment that his perspective was both validating and terrifying. What would it mean to acknowledge just how unfair it had all been? I'd built my identity around rising above, working harder, needing less. Admitting the inequality meant confronting years of suppressed anger and hurt. By the time Brian graduated from Stanford with his business degree, 5 years for a 4-year program, I had finally reached a place of relative stability. I had savings, a growing career, and a relationship with Nathan that showed me what actual support felt like. I wasn't financially dependent on my parents anymore, which gave me the first taste of genuine freedom from their approval system. "You don't have to go to his graduation," Nathan reminded me as I agonized over the invitation. But some part of me still craved their recognition, still hoped that maybe this time would be different. It wasn't. But I couldn't have predicted just how dramatically things would unravel. Brian's Stanford graduation party at our parents' Seattle home was an extravagant affair that resembled a wedding reception more than a graduation celebration. White tents sprawled across the manicured backyard. Catering staff in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A live jazz quartet played in the corner. The guest list included extended family, family friends, my parents' colleagues, and seemingly everyone Brian had ever met. I couldn't help comparing it to my own graduation celebration 6 years earlier, a reservation for 4 at an Olive Garden where my parents spent most of dinner answering work calls. "Quite the production," Nathan whispered, squeezing my hand supportively as we surveyed the scene. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Let's just get through this." After dinner and multiple lengthy toasts to Brian's perseverance and exceptional achievement, a 2.8 GPA and a job at our father's friend's company, my father clinked his glass for attention. "Everyone, please join us in the driveway for a special presentation." The crowd of roughly 60 people migrated to the circular driveway, where something large sat beneath a car cover with a massive red bow. My stomach tightened as I realized what was happening. "Brian, son," my father announced, positioning Brian in front of the covered vehicle, "your mother and I couldn't be prouder of all you've accomplished. You've overcome so much and worked so hard." He paused, his voice thick with emotion that seemed genuinely heartfelt. "We know you're going to take the business world by storm, and you deserve to arrive in style." With theatrical timing, my mother pulled away the cover to reveal a gleaming white Tesla Model S. The crowd gasped appropriately. "A 2023 Tesla Model S," my father announced proudly. "Fully loaded, of course." Brian's face lit up as he circled the $90,000 vehicle, running his hands over its sleek lines. My mother handed him the key card, and he immediately jumped in, playing with the enormous center touchscreen while family members took photos. I stood frozen, my mind involuntarily calculating. This single gift was worth more than all the financial support I'd received from my parents for college, my first apartment, and graduation combined, with enough left over to pay off my remaining student loans. Nathan's arm tightened around my waist. "You okay?" he murmured. I nodded mechanically. "Fine." But the familiar knot of inadequacy tightened in my chest. Brian honked the horn playfully, calling out, "Who wants a ride first?" Cousins and friends lined up eagerly while I hung back, helping the catering staff clear empty champagne flutes, an old habit from when I worked events during college. Later, as the party was winding down, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "You could at least pretend to be happy for your brother," she chided, arranging leftover desserts into containers. "I am happy for him, Mom," I replied evenly. "The Tesla is incredible. Then why have you been walking around with that expression all evening? She mimicked a glum face that looked nothing like mine. I carefully measured my response. I'm just tired from work. We're launching a major campaign next week. My father entered, catching the end of our conversation. The marketing thing's still going well? He asked vaguely, having never quite grasped what my director-level position actually entailed. Yes, actually. I was going to mention earlier, I got promoted to senior marketing director last month. It came with a nice raise. That's nice, honey, my mother said absently. Oh, your father and I meant to tell you, we're helping Brian with the deposit on a condo downtown. It's close to his new office. I blinked, processing this additional financial gift they hadn't thought worth mentioning until now. A condo and a Tesla, I said before I could stop myself. That's quite a graduation package. My father's expression hardened slightly. Brian needs a confidence boost as he starts his career. And honestly, Autumn, we've always known you'd land on your feet. You're the capable one. There it was, the backhanded compliment that had defined my existence. My capability, my independence, my resilience, all traits I developed out of necessity, were now the justification for the unequal treatment. He just needs a little help, my mother added. You know how sensitive he is. The conversation was interrupted as Brian bounded into the kitchen, Tesla key card prominently displayed on a lanyard around his neck. Dad, the acceleration is insane. 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. My parents immediately brightened, the previous conversation forgotten. Nathan found me 30 minutes later, sitting alone on the back porch steps. Ready to go? He asked gently. On the drive home to our apartment, the dam finally broke. Tears streamed down my face as years of accumulated hurt poured out. It's not about the car, I kept saying. It's what it represents. It's the pattern. It's always been this way and it will never change. Nathan let me cry, one hand steadily holding mine across the center console. You deserve better, he said simply. You always have. Over the next 2 months, Brian's Tesla became the centerpiece of his social media existence. Every day brought new posts, Brian posing beside the car, Brian filming the acceleration, Brian showcasing the autopilot features. His entire personality seemed absorbed by his new acquisition. What began as annoying soon became concerning. Instagram stories showed the speedometer hitting 110 miles per hour on public roads. Snapchats captured him using autopilot incorrectly, taking his hands off the wheel for dangerous periods. One video showed him and his friends drinking in a parking lot before getting into the Tesla. He's going to kill himself or someone else, I told Nathan one evening after seeing Brian post yet another reckless driving video. Have you talked to your parents? Nathan asked, knowing the answer already. I had. Multiple times. Each conversation followed the same pattern. Me, I'm worried about Brian's driving. He's posting videos going over 100 miles per hour. Mom. He's just excited about his car, Autumn. Don't be such a worrier. Dad, that Tesla has more safety features than any car on the road. The implied subtext was always the same. Your concern is actually jealousy. The situation came to a head at our monthly family Sunday dinner in late August. Brian arrived 20 minutes late, tires screeching as he pulled into our parents' driveway. Did you see that drift? He laughed as he entered, smelling faintly of beer. Almost took out Mom's rose bushes. During dinner, while Brian regaled our parents with stories of his new job, where he had yet to complete any actual projects, I tried again to raise my concerns. Brian, I saw your post going 120 on the highway, I said during a pause in conversation. That's really dangerous. The Tesla's powerful, but it's not a race car. Brian rolled his eyes dramatically. Here we go again. Sorry, we can't all drive boring hybrid cars like responsible Autumn. It's not about being boring. It's about not killing yourself or others. My mother jumped in immediately. Autumn, please. We're trying to have a nice dinner. Brian's an adult and can make his own decisions. He's making decisions that could hurt other people, I persisted. Have you seen his social media? He's drinking and driving. He's using autopilot incorrectly. My father set down his fork with irritation. What your brother does with his car isn't really your concern, is it? It is when it's illegal and dangerous. Brian smirked. Just because you didn't get a Tesla doesn't mean you have to try to ruin mine. And there it was, the accusation that my legitimate safety concerns were nothing more than jealousy. The familiar script played out exactly as expected. The following weekend, leaving a restaurant with Nathan, I spotted Brian's distinctive white Tesla in the parking lot of a bar. It was nearly midnight. Peering through the window, I could see Brian and 3 friends inside, clearly intoxicated, with Brian holding his key card. I confronted him immediately. Brian, you can't drive right now. You're drunk. Let me call you an Uber. His friends laughed while Brian waved me off. The car practically drives itself, sis. Chill out. That's not how autopilot works. Please, just let me get you a ride. He pushed past me. Stop trying to control everything. Just because your life is boring doesn't mean mine has to be. I stood helplessly as they piled into the Tesla and peeled out of the parking lot, music blaring. That night, I sent detailed texts to both my parents. Brian was driving drunk tonight. I offered to get him an Uber and he refused. This isn't jealousy or exaggeration. He's going to hurt himself or someone else. The Tesla is encouraging his worst impulses. Please talk to him before something terrible happens. My mother's response came the next morning. You need to stop obsessing over your brother's life. He's just having fun and blowing off steam from his stressful job. My father didn't respond at all. You did what you could, Nathan assured me as I showed him the exchange. Document everything. If something happens, at least you'll have proof you tried to prevent it. I sent one final text to Brian directly. I'm not trying to ruin your fun. I'm trying to keep you safe. Please don't drink and drive. Please use the autopilot correctly. I'm genuinely worried about you. He responded with a thumbs down emoji. 3 days later, at 1:43 a.m., my phone rang. Autumn? It's Mom. Brian's been in an accident. We're at Northwest Hospital. Come quickly. Her voice sounded strange, tight, and controlled, but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't identify. Not grief exactly. Something closer to anger. Nathan drove while I sat rigid in the passenger seat, mind racing through worst-case scenarios. She said he's alive, I repeated, more to reassure myself than anything. She would have said if he was seriously hurt. The emergency room was brightly lit and oddly quiet at 2 a.m. We found my parents in a private waiting area, my mother pacing while my father spoke intensely into his phone. What happened? Is Brian okay? I asked immediately. My mother's expression was strange, worried but also calculating. He's fine. Some cuts and bruises. They're doing a final check before releasing him. Relief flooded through me. Thank God. What happened with the car? My father ended his call and turned to me, his expression unexpectedly cold. Totaled. Completely destroyed. Along with the front of Wilson's Fine Wines on Madison Avenue. He crashed into a storefront? Nathan asked. Apparently, my mother said tightly, he was racing some college friends. Lost control on the turn. I sank into a chair. Racing. While drunk again, I'm guessing. My father's eyes narrowed. The police did a breathalyzer. He was just at the legal limit. The fact that they were focusing on the technical legality rather than the recklessness spoke volumes. The car is destroyed, my mother repeated, a strange emphasis in her voice. A $90,000 car, gone. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, Brian could have killed himself or someone else. The car is the least important thing here. Easy for you to say, my father muttered. Before I could ask what he meant, a nurse directed us to Brian's examination room. My brother sat on the edge of the bed, a bandage above his eye, scrolling through his phone. He looked up when we entered, and something flickered across his face when he saw me, something that sent a chill down my spine. "Hey," he said, his voice unnaturally bright. "Sorry about the late-night drama." My mother rushed to his side. "How are you feeling, sweetheart? Does your head hurt?" "I'm fine, Mom. Just a headache." His eyes darted to me again with that same strange expression. "The Tesla's totaled," my father stated flatly. Brian winced. "Yeah, about that, there's something you should know." Every instinct in my body went on high alert. I wasn't the only one driving it today, Brian continued, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. "Autumn borrowed it this afternoon." I gasped. "What?" "No, I didn't." Brian continued as if I hadn't spoken. "She wanted to try the acceleration. I let her take it for a couple hours. When she brought it back, she mentioned something felt off with the steering, but I figured it was nothing." I stared at him in absolute shock. "That's a complete lie. I never drove your car. I was at work all day, then had dinner with Nathan at Luciano's. We have receipts, witnesses." My mother turned to me, her expression hardening. "Autumn, please. This isn't the time for denials." "Denials? He's lying. I never touched his car." My father stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The police report will show Brian was driving during the accident, but if there was prior damage that affected the vehicle's handling." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You think I damaged his car and that caused the accident? That's insane. I never drove it." Brian looked at me with an expression of manufactured sympathy. "It's okay, sis. I'm not mad. I probably shouldn't have let you drive it knowing you're not used to high-performance vehicles." I turned to Nathan, who had been watching this scene unfold with increasing disbelief. "Tell them. I was with you all evening." Nathan stepped forward. "It's true. Autumn and I left work together at 5, went straight to dinner, and then home. She never went anywhere near Brian's car." My mother dismissed this with a wave. "You'd say anything to support her story." "It's not a story, it's the truth." I felt like I was losing my mind. Why would I damage Brian's car? What possible reason would I have? My father's voice was cold. "Jealousy can make people do unfortunate things." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. I looked from my father to my mother to Brian, searching for any sign that this was an elaborate, cruel joke. Their faces remained impassive, united against me. "I can't believe this," I whispered. "You'd rather believe I sabotaged Brian's car out of jealousy than accept that he wrecked it through his own recklessness? After I repeatedly warned all of you this exact thing would happen." "Those warnings just show you had the car on your mind," my mother countered, the mental gymnastics almost impressive in their absurdity. I backed toward the door, suddenly needing air. "I'm not doing this. I'm not participating in this alternate reality where I'm responsible for Brian's actions." In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe normally. Nathan followed, putting his arm around me. "They're in shock," he suggested, always trying to find the charitable explanation. "They'll calm down and realize how ridiculous this is." But I knew better. This wasn't shock. This was the same dynamic that had defined our family for decades, just reaching a new, surreal level. Brian could never be fully responsible. Someone else, usually me, had to bear the burden of his mistakes. As we drove home in stunned silence, my phone began buzzing with text messages from my mother. "We need to discuss payment arrangements for the Tesla repairs. Your father is considering filing an insurance claim against you. If you just admit what you did, we could work through this as a family." Each message more ludicrous than the last. Over the next week, the situation deteriorated further. Brian elaborated on his lie, now claiming he had surveillance footage of me driving the car, footage that mysteriously couldn't be shared because it was part of the insurance investigation. My parents began telling family members their version of events, and soon distant relatives were sending me disappointed messages about taking responsibility for my actions. Madison Palmer, a family friend who'd known us since childhood, called me directly after hearing the story from my mother. "Autumn, this doesn't sound like you at all," she said cautiously. "And frankly, it doesn't add up with what I know about Brian either." Her skepticism was the first crack in the united front against me. It made me realize that while I couldn't change my family's warped perception, I could still fight for the truth. 2 weeks after the accident, my parents escalated from vague threats to concrete action. My father left a voicemail informing me that their insurance company would be contacting me about liability for prior damage to the vehicle that contributed to the accident. That evening, I received a text from my mother. "Family dinner Sunday at 5. Important matters to discuss. Mandatory. Don't go," Nathan urged. "They're just going to ambush you again." Part of me knew he was right, but another part, the part still desperately seeking some resolution, some acknowledgement of reality from my family, overruled my better judgment. The dinner was exactly the ambush Nathan predicted. Not only were my parents and Brian present, but also my father's brother Uncle Greg, my mother's sister Aunt Melissa, and my grandparents, all people who had unquestioningly accepted Brian's version of events. I'd barely sat down when my father slid a document across the table toward me. "What's this?" I asked, not touching it. "A payment plan," he explained coldly. "For the $30,000 of damage not covered by insurance due to your tampering with the vehicle." I stared at him in disbelief. I didn't touch Brian's car. Ever. Not once. My grandmother patted my hand condescendingly. "Sweetheart, mistakes happen. The important thing is taking responsibility." "There's nothing to take responsibility for. Brian crashed his car while racing drunk." End of story. Brian shook his head sadly, playing the wounded party masterfully. "I've tried to be understanding, Autumn, but your refusal to admit what you did is really disappointing." Something inside me snapped. The accumulated weight of years being gaslit, dismissed, and blamed crashed down all at once. I stood up so abruptly my chair toppled backward. "I will not sit here and be accused of something that never happened. I will not pay a single penny for Brian's recklessness. And I will not continue participating in this family's delusion that Brian is a perfect golden child who bears no responsibility for his actions." My mother's face flushed with anger. "If that's your attitude, perhaps you shouldn't participate in this family at all." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I looked around the table, searching for any ally, any crack in the united front against me. Finding none, I made the decision that would change everything. "Fine. But if you're going to exile me from this family over Brian's lie, I'm going to prove it's a lie first." I walked out, hands shaking but resolve strengthening with each step. The next morning, I contacted Sandra Parker, an attorney specializing in insurance disputes. During our consultation, she listened to my story with increasing interest. "Teslas are essentially computers on wheels," she explained when I'd finished. "They record absolutely everything. Speed, location, driver inputs, even video from multiple cameras. If you were never in that car, the data will show it. How do we get that data? We can subpoena it if necessary, but first, let's try a formal request through proper channels. The vehicle identification number should be on any insurance documents your parents have." Through Madison, who still had access to my parents' house, I obtained the VIN from paperwork in my father's study. With this information, my attorney drafted an official request to Tesla for all data and footage from the vehicle for the 2 weeks preceding the accident. Meanwhile, I meticulously documented my whereabouts on the day Brian claimed I drove his car. Credit card receipts from lunch near my office. Security footage from my workplace showing my car in the parking lot all day. Dinner receipts from Luciano's. Witnesses who saw me at various points throughout the day, all nowhere near Brian's Tesla. Nathan, who worked in tech, researched Tesla's monitoring systems extensively. These cars track absolutely everything, he confirmed. They know exactly who is driving and when. They have interior cameras that record the driver. There's no way Brian's lie holds up against the actual data. We learned that Teslas used owner profiles linked to specific key cards, recording which profile was active during every drive. The cars maintained detailed logs of all driving activity, including instances of aggressive acceleration, speeding, and erratic movements. Most crucially for my case, the interior camera could confirm exactly who was behind the wheel at all times. While waiting for Tesla's response, my parents escalated their pressure campaign. They began contacting my colleagues and friends, spreading their version of events, attempting to isolate me socially. My father called my boss, ostensibly to explain the situation regarding my legal troubles, a transparent attempt to damage my professional standing. Fortunately, I'd already briefed my boss on the family dispute, and she recognized the manipulation attempt for what it was. Still, the psychological toll was mounting. I started seeing therapist Rebecca Miller weekly to manage the stress and grief of essentially losing my family to this absurd situation. What they're doing is a form of collective narcissism, Rebecca explained during one session. They've created a family narrative where Brian cannot be fundamentally wrong. When reality contradicts that narrative, they'll twist reality rather than adjust their perception. After 3 excruciating weeks, Tesla responded to our request. The preliminary information confirmed exactly what I'd known all along. Brian had been the only person driving the Tesla since he received it. The data showed a consistent driver profile, Brian's, and no indication of my alleged afternoon drive. More damning still, the data showed Brian had engaged the ludicrous mode acceleration feature over 30 times on the day of the accident, had exceeded 100 miles per hour 4 times, and had received multiple autopilot warnings for removing his hands from the wheel. When my parents and Brian learned I'd obtained the Tesla data, their response was immediate panic. Brian tried to claim the data was obviously corrupted. My father threatened legal action against Tesla for privacy violations. My mother left tearful voicemails claiming I was tearing the family apart over nothing. Most tellingly, Brian attempted to access his Tesla account to delete driving data, an action automatically logged by the system and included in the supplemental report we received. With each piece of evidence strengthening my position, I felt a growing sense of vindication mixed with profound sadness. I was right, but at what cost? The family I'd known was revealing itself to be a construct built on favoritism and denial, willing to sacrifice me to maintain their preferred narrative. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down to keep the peace. The truth mattered. My reality mattered. And I was finally ready to fight for it. The complete Tesla data package arrived on a Thursday morning. Sandra Parker called immediately. "This is even more definitive than we expected," she said, her voice reflecting professional satisfaction. Not only does it confirm Brian was the only driver, but the interior camera footage shows him drinking what appears to be alcohol shortly before the accident. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this final confirmation. "Send me everything." The evidence was overwhelming. Timestamps matched with GPS data showed the Tesla had never been anywhere near my workplace or home on the day in question. Driver profile logs showed Brian's profile active for every single drive since the car was purchased. Interior camera footage showed only Brian and his friends ever occupying the driver's seat. Most damningly, footage from the night of the accident clearly showed Brian drinking from a flask while behind the wheel, then racing another vehicle moments before losing control and crashing into the wine shop. After reviewing everything with Sandra and consulting with therapist Rebecca about the healthiest approach, I made my decision. This wouldn't be about revenge or even vindication. It would be about truth and establishing boundaries that should have existed long ago. I texted my parents. I have the complete Tesla data package, including video footage. I'm coming to the house Sunday at 2 p.m. to present it. Invite anyone you've told your version of events to. This ends now. My father responded with predictable bluster. Any illegally obtained evidence will be inadmissible. I didn't bother explaining there was nothing illegal about the rightful owner of a vehicle, their insurance company, who now owned the totaled Tesla, providing data about that vehicle. His response told me everything. They were still clinging to the lie. Nathan offered to come with me, but I decided this was something I needed to do alone. I've been fighting this dynamic my entire life, I explained. I need to be the one to end it. Sunday arrived with perfect Seattle fall weather, crisp, clear, and dramatic, matching my mood exactly. I arrived at my parents' house carrying a laptop and portable projector. To my surprise, the driveway was full of cars. They'd actually invited people to what they likely thought would be my capitulation. My mother opened the door with a tight smile. Autumn, we were beginning to think you wouldn't come. The living room was full. My parents, Brian, both sets of grandparents, 2 aunts and uncles, and several family friends, including Madison. All witnesses to what my parents likely expected to be my apology and acceptance of their payment plan. Thank you all for coming, I began, setting up the projector with steady hands. I know you've all heard a version of events regarding Brian's Tesla accident. Today I'm going to show you the actual truth, directly from the Tesla's own recording systems. Brian shifted uncomfortably while my father interrupted. I think there's been a misunderstanding about why we're here today. No misunderstanding, I replied calmly. You've accused me of damaging Brian's car. You've told everyone here that lie. Now we're going to see what really happened. I started with the easy-to-understand evidence, a map showing the Tesla's movement on the day Brian claimed I drove it, nowhere near my location. Driver logs showing Brian's profile active for every drive. Interior camera stills showing only Brian ever in the driver's seat. The room remained uncomfortably silent as I methodically worked through the evidence. My mother stared at her hands while my father maintained a stony expression. Brian looked increasingly pale. Then came the footage from the accident day. This is from inside the car, 2 hours before the crash, I explained, projecting video of Brian drinking from a flask while driving. And this is from the external cameras right before impact, showing Brian racing another vehicle. The speedometer visible in the corner showed 93 miles per hour in a 35 zone. The silence in the room deepened, then fractured as my grandmother gasped audibly. Madison's eyes were wide with shock. My Uncle Greg looked from the projection to Brian with growing confusion. The Tesla recorded everything, I concluded. Every drive, every action, every moment. There is no evidence I ever drove the car because I never did. There is abundant evidence that Brian drove recklessly while drinking and caused the accident through his own actions. I turned to face my brother directly. Brian, would you like to tell everyone the truth now? Cornered, Brian's composed facade finally cracked. It's not fair, he burst out. It was just one mistake. They were going to be so disappointed in me. And there it was, the admission. My mother made a small, wounded sound while my father sat perfectly still, the family mythology crumbling before his eyes. One mistake. I repeated incredulously. You drove drunk. You raced on public streets. You endangered lives. Then you deliberately lied and tried to blame me, going so far as to threaten legal action. Those are multiple deliberate choices, not one mistake. Brian stood abruptly. I knew you'd do this. Make it all about you, make me look terrible. His voice rose hysterically. Perfect Autumn, always so responsible, so successful without any help. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to make me look bad. The desperation in his voice was painful to hear, but the absurdity of his claim, that I, who had fought for every opportunity and achievement, was somehow jealous of him, who had everything handed to him, broke something open in the room. "Brian, that's enough," my grandfather said quietly, the first family member besides me to acknowledge reality. My father finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "The evidence does seem conclusive." "Seem?" I challenged. "It is conclusive. I never drove the car. Brian lied, crashed while driving recklessly, and you both chose to believe him over me without a shred of evidence, because that's the pattern in this family. Brian is protected. I am sacrificed." Madison stood up, moving to stand beside me. "I've watched this dynamic play out for years. What you've done to Autumn is unconscionable. All of you." Brian stormed out, slamming the front door. My mother began crying quietly, whether from the revelation of Brian's lie or the public exposure of their family system, I couldn't tell. My father cleared his throat. "The insurance claim against you will be withdrawn, of course." "Of course," I echoed, his grudging concession to reality, so inadequate it was almost laughable. "But this isn't just about the insurance claim. This is about decades of favoritism, dismissal, and gaslighting. This is about my place in this family, or whether I have one at all." I packed up my equipment with deliberate calm. "I've said what I came to say and shown what I came to show. The truth is now on record. What you do with it is up to you." As I walked toward the door, my grandmother touched my arm gently. "Autumn, wait." I paused, looking into her aged face, seeing a glimmer of genuine regret. "I believe you," she said simply. "And I'm sorry we didn't before. It wasn't everything. It wasn't nearly enough to erase years of inequality. But it was something, the first crack in a lifetime of denial, the first step toward whatever came next." For 3 weeks after the confrontation, my parents' house fell silent. No calls, no texts, no attempts at contact. Brian blocked me on all social media. The family that had been so eager to accuse me now seemed unable to face what had been revealed. In therapy with Rebecca, I worked through the complex grief of the situation. "It's like losing my family twice," I explained during one session. First realizing the family I thought I had never really existed, then losing contact with the actual family I do have. Families built on dysfunctional dynamics often shatter when those dynamics are challenged, Rebecca observed. The question now is what kind of relationship, if any, you want to build from the rubble. I wasn't sure I knew the answer. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of the entire situation, to accept that my family as I'd known it was a loss. Another part still yearned for some kind of resolution, some acknowledgement that might lead to healing. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon in late October, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail, listening later with Nathan beside me for support. "Autumn, it's Mom." Her voice sounded smaller somehow, less certain. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, about what you showed us, about what you said." A long pause. "I'd like to talk, if you're willing." "Just the two of us." "Let me know." Nathan watched my face carefully. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking she didn't actually apologize for anything specific," I replied. "But it's more self-reflection than I've ever heard from her before." After discussing it with Rebecca, I agreed to meet my mother at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between our homes. She was already there when I arrived, looking older somehow, less polished than her usual appearance. "Thank you for coming," she began as I sat down across from her. "What did you want to talk about?" I kept my tone neutral, protective barriers firmly in place. She twisted her napkin nervously. "I've been seeing someone. A therapist." The admission clearly cost her something in pride. "After what happened, after what you showed us, I realized some things weren't right. Haven't been right for a long time." I waited, not offering the easy forgiveness she might have been hoping for. "The way we treated you compared to Brian," she continued hesitantly. The therapist calls it golden child and scapegoat dynamics. I didn't want to believe it at first, but looking back, her voice trailed off. I'm beginning to see patterns I never recognized before. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it was more than I'd ever expected. And Dad? Her expression tightened. He's struggling. His whole worldview was built around certain beliefs about family. About Brian. It's harder for him. And Brian's angry. At you for exposing him. At us for now questioning our approach to parenting. He's enrolled in a substance abuse program. Reluctantly, as part of the insurance settlement. We talked for nearly 2 hours. There were no dramatic apologies or emotional breakthroughs, but there was something new. My mother actually listening when I spoke, considering my perspective rather than dismissing it outright. As weeks turned to months, small steps toward a new kind of relationship emerged. My father eventually called, his acknowledgement of wrongdoing coming in typical Howard Hayes fashion, oblique and practical rather than emotional. The insurance company reviewed the Tesla footage, he said by way of greeting. They're not pursuing any claims against you, of course. In fact, they're pursuing Brian for insurance fraud for his false statements. It was his way of admitting I'd been right all along. Brian's journey proved more complicated. His initial response was to double down, painting himself as the victim of my vendetta. But reality has a way of asserting itself. With his parents no longer automatically shielding him from consequences, he faced actual accountability perhaps for the first time in his life. Legal penalties for the accident, mandatory counseling, community service. 6 months after the confrontation, we attempted a family dinner, just my parents, Brian, and me. The conversation was stilted, the dynamic still adjusting to its new configuration. Brian offered what passed for an apology in his world. I shouldn't have said you drove the car, he mumbled, staring at his plate. That was not cool. It wasn't exactly profound remorse, but it was acknowledgement of reality, a start. Meanwhile, my own life continued evolving. Nathan proposed during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands, offering a vintage emerald ring and a promise of partnership based on genuine respect. My professional trajectory continued upward with a promotion to marketing VP. Most importantly, I developed stronger boundaries. I no longer accepted dismissal or gaslighting, not from family or anyone else. I built deeper connections with friends who valued me, creating a chosen family alongside my biological one. During wedding planning, my mother tentatively offered to help, conscious of stepping on toes. Whatever you think is best, Autumn. It's your day. A small miracle in the Hayes family, my preferences taking precedence. When Nathan and I bought our first home, a modest but charming craftsman in Ballard, my father offered financial assistance. I declined politely but firmly. We've got this covered. But thanks for the offer. The old dynamic would have interpreted my independence as rejection. The emerging new dynamic allowed for a different understanding, that my self-reliance was strength, not rebuke. At a family dinner celebrating my grandmother's 80th birthday, I noticed subtle but significant changes. My promotion received actual interest and questions rather than cursory acknowledgement. Brian's latest job update didn't dominate the entire conversation. My mother stopped one of my uncles when he began falling into old patterns of disproportionate praise for Brian's minor achievements. Are my parents perfect now? Far from it. Old habits resurface, old dynamics reassert themselves in moments of stress. Brian still receives more benefit of the doubt than I do. But there's a new awareness, a consciousness that wasn't there before. As for me, I've found something I never had before, peace with my place in the family story. I no longer need their perfect approval or equal treatment to feel whole. The truth of who I am exists independently of their ability to see it. Sometimes the most important step isn't grand or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply standing firmly in your truth and refusing to let others rewrite it. One step toward authenticity can transform not just a moment, but an entire future. I often think about what would have happened if I'd accepted their version of events, paid the money, shouldered the blame. The old family system would have remained intact, but at what cost to my spirit? Sometimes families must break before they can heal into something healthier. Has your family ever tried to make you question your own reality? Have you ever had to stand up for your truth against people who should have supported you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more authentic conversations about family dynamics, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing in their truth is worth it. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the hardest step is the one that finally sets you free.